Peter, thanks very much indeed for coming here on behalf of Training Command. Thanks very much for taking part. Much appreciated. Can you please identify yourself with your name, your rank at the time of service in Vietnam and the time of your tour in Vietnam, and then give me a background of your soldiering history prior to joining the training team?
Right, I was prior to my regimental particulars I was a warrant officer class 2. I've always been in the infantry. At that time I'd had several years service. Just cut there, please.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Can you please identify yourself, name, rank, and date of tour in Vietnam?
Yeah. My name is Peter Wilkes. I was an infantry warrant officer class 2, and I served in the training team from 1968 to 69, June to June. Prior to that, I was a platoon sergeant at 1RTB Kapuka, and where I'd been serving for about approximately 3 years. I went to the team and I had interest in the team for a long time, but also in other units that were serving in Vietnam. But one can't be in the right place at the right time. And when the offer came up for me to go to the training team, I leapt at it for various reasons. Firstly, for the experience that I was going to get. And now every infantry soldier, I feel, well, certainly my opinion, has to test himself in battle. I'd previously served 2 years in Malaya, and they were very good years, but they were the grounding of jungle warfare. Malaya was a great training area, and so I think, like a lot of infantry people, I was toey to try myself out. So the offer came up, and I left to go to Vietnam in June 1968. I'll just digress a little bit. Before going over there, I'd been training National Service and Regular Army people, and we were getting casualty figures back from the task force that was over there. And these casualty figures we recognised a lot from our nominal roles in the 1RTB, and we'd say that I trained that chap, or I helped train that chap, and we get it all around. And this concerned me a great deal with a lot of these casualties. I was often wondered rather, whether there's some fault in our way in training or not. And also, I was desperately needed to know the way the enemy reacted in given situations in the field. So, to me, it was a tremendous thing to be able to be offered to go to the training team. On arrival at Ton Son Nhut, there's a little bit of trepidation, and I was very pleased to see an Australian warrant officer there ready to pick me up, because I would have been totally lost if I had to wait for a while, and because I had no one to contact, wouldn't have a clue who to contact. So anyhow, so I was taken to Free World headquarters, to the training team headquarters, which was at Free World headquarters, and I was just given a briefing, and I was told that I was going to go to My Linh subsector, which is in Quang Tri City, in the northern eastern province. So then they sent me off to a billet, which was at the Dong Khan Hotel in the suburb of Shao Lon. That night I didn't get much sleep. I could hear the rockets landing around on the southern side of Saigon. I thought, well, this is just a slow introduction. And I was quite lonely actually, because there's no other Australians there until the morning, when I had to come downstairs and meet a vehicle that was going to pick me up, where I run into a warrant officer, Dad Kelly, and who was also slept in the same building, but I hadn't realised that. So back to Saigon, and then I set up country to Quang Tri, and
okay, I'll just hold you there for a moment. We'll get back to Quang Tri. What were your immediate? I know you'd been in Malaysia, so was arriving at Ton Son Nhut, arriving in Saigon, was that just another Asian city that wasn't that unfamiliar? Were you feeling apprehension? What was What was Peter Wilkes the bloke feeling? Not Peter Wilkes the soldier, Peter Wilkes the bloke.
Yeah. I was very apprehensive, yeah. It was similar to other Asian cities. However, I still I didn't know who you could trust, or whether you could trust people at all. And so, you know, there's always just looking around, and you see beggars and people trying to acknowledge your presence, you know, smiling or nodding or somewhere, and others were look at in a disgusting sort of a way. And so apprehension certainly was the way. And I suppose loneliness struck out, you know, immediate loneliness. And so I was looking forward to be with my own type and my own people.
So you didn't know at the time, you didn't know what your posting was going to be in Vietnam, did you? You didn't.
No.
You weren't told in Australia where you were going to be sent to. You were told
No.
once you arrived in Saigon.
That's correct, yeah.
Commanding officer. Would that be from the commanding officer of the team?
Yes, yes.
Okay, well, we'll take it from there. He said to you, Peter, you're off to...
Yeah, off to Myland subsector, which was at Quang Tri City, and just on the edge of the city. It was a regional, I'm not sure, I think it was regional force or a popular force unit operated from there. And I wasn't looking forward to that. From talking to people from who had previous experience, I didn't want to work with the RF and PF. And so when I got up to Quang Tri, I went straight to the United States, the big headquarters set up there. Cut please. It's what they call the friggin' thing. I want to give you quick terminology. Quang Tri, bloody.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah, they sent me to the Quang Tri, to the MACV headquarters, Military Assistant Command, and where most Americans, local Americans, officers and senior NCOs, or enlisted men, and Australian officers likewise were billeted. And there I run into Major David Milley, Australian, who I think he just arrived in country a few days before or something of that nature. And I was then informed that my posting had changed, and I was then reposted to the 5th Battalion of the 2nd Arden Regiment, which is just being formed, and it was being formed and fostered by the 1st Regiment of the 1st Arden Division, which was in Quang Tri. So I then moved over to the 1st Regiment advisory headquarters, and then the battalion gradually filled. They was on operations, and they was very short, a couple of companies short, and they gradually filling. And the battalion commander was a bloke called Kin, Captain Kin, and he was a very hard disciplinarian, an excellent professional soldier, a Buddhist, and he was built into shape a battalion that had been formed from people who had been deserters from previous units, jailbirds and all this type of thing, and corporal punishment, as you may imagine, was something very fierce. And so it's quite often to see someone in a barbed wire cage and being beaten and put in a cage in the sun for some time until they learnt how to do things properly, or how to behave better. So we was up-con to the 1st Regiment for about a month, and then we got a posting which was up to the demilitarised zone on outpost Alpha 2, which is the northernmost of the outposts across the DMZ. So we took up residence there, relieved I think the 3rd Battalion. Now in the regiment, the 2nd Regiment, there was 5 battalions. I think most of the battalions had most of the regiments had 5 battalions. Now, so our job there was to maintain the base, the Alpha 2, the outpost, and patrol between the other outposts, Alpha 2 which is on the coast, on the sand dunes, and Alpha 3 which is to our west. And those battalions were to do the same, and also in depth, patrol in depth. We never stopped too many of the angry people from coming across, I don't think, but we did have a lot of contacts. In fact, every day we patrolled out, we had contacts, and and the Arvin soldiers acquitted themselves very well. They were an excellent professional unit, or became a very professional unit.
When you first took up the post, before you went out to the outpost, did an Australian advisor hand over to you?
No, I was the first advisor to the 5th Battalion, and the first Australian advisor. The senior advisor was Captain Jim Williams, United States Army. I can't think of the names escape me, but there's an American lieutenant and 2 American E7 sergeants.
What did they brief you on as to the situation of the war, where you were and where you were going to be?
Well, it was just a local brief on what to expect, what we could expect, but that was purely, I guess, what they thought could happen. We didn't expect any invasion across the border or anything like that. Our forward wire of the outpost was into the border of the DMZ. Like the DMZ, I think was supposed to be 5 kilometres across, 2.5 on each side, I think, of the border. And the Ben High River was that part of the border, and we could look across it. We had a little ridge line in front of us. There's a bit of paddy field, and then there's a river. And they had the North Vietnamese had observation towers along the river. They had 3 along the river. One was hidden, and we didn't see it for quite some time. And we had at our outpost, Alpha 1, Alpha 2, Alpha 3, we had also had observation towers. So we could look at each other through binoculars and smile at each other and sort of mockingly aim rifles at each other. But and on the ridge to our west, which is only 50 metres out of our wire, there's a tunnel complex, and we used to patrol, do company and 2 company operations over there all the time. Sometimes we'd get joy, and sometimes we wouldn't. Sometimes they'd leave us alone, and sometimes they'd give us a bit of a caning. But it was always interesting, to say the least.
So, the battalion you were working with, they were under the command of a very experienced person. They'd all been at war a long time. They were fighting for their country. Yeah. How did they react to the brand new, as it were, Australian advisor joining their ranks? Did they test you at any stage? I know a lot of people were.
Yeah. No, not really. They were friendly towards me. I think I was a little bit shy initially, and they were to me as well. You know, just sort of treating each other with caution, and I had to wear in to the American communication system, radio communication system, which didn't take long, and observe. I didn't say a thing really, except to exchange the time of day with the Vietnamese officers until I got my feet on the ground, and that may have been 4 or 5 weeks. You know, really, it was just, and I just go with the flow, and until I saw how things were going. And it was never a case of advising. I always found. I think many people would say the same, because you can't advise people who've fought the war for 20 odd years. They're not going to listen to you. So who's this upstart? So the only thing you do is to recommend occasionally, and you had to be very careful with that, and to let them know what you had available, because primarily our job was to call in fire support, either artillery, American artillery, sometimes Arvin artillery, but they generally could call in their own, or generally did, American air, and there we were also blessed with naval gunfire, and so we could call in naval gunfire, which was great because it was extremely accurate. The New Jersey came on station while I was over there, and I fired it. That's the terminology that is used. I fired this ship, but yeah, I fired it. I understand I was the 3rd to fire it when it came on station, and probably the first and probably the only Australian ever fired it. But with one salvo, it neutralised the grid square pretty well. You know, it's just horrendous. It's magic, beautiful, and also the Australians at the Perth and I think the Hobart changed around about that time, and they were good, smaller guns but very accurate. The American Marine gunfire teams, they used to love firing the Australian ships because of this accuracy. If your map reference was right, they'd be on target, exactly. They were fantastic.
From how far away would they be firing?
Or over the horizon, that's, no, I don't recall, I'm afraid.
20 miles, something like that?
Well, the New Jersey at least, I don't know about the Australian, yeah. New Jersey would probably be way out. Yeah.
So can we talk about a typical operation that you went on that resulted in contact and what would happen as a result of that contact, if there was such a thing as a typical operation?
Well, okay then, we did a sweep, 2-company sweep. We always had to have the base maintained, of course, with most of our support companies of the battalion was on there. We had 105s, I think it was 5 105 guns on the, which is under command of the battalion commander, and we had 81mm mortars. This was the Arvin weaponry. But we always had to leave companies or subunits back on the base for obvious reasons, and generally our operations there would be, say, 2 companies, maybe sometimes 3, and we do a sweep between the outposts. Now we had been getting a little bit of sniper fire. It was just a nuisance fire more than anything from the ridge to our west, and we cleared it a few times. And on this particular time operation, we cleared the ridge, and we didn't get much opposition. It was quite strange actually, because our advanced troops, it was the middle of the day. Now this is very prominent in my thing, the middle of the day, the heat of the day, when there's no threat. Asians tend to like to have a bit of a sleep in the middle of the day. And so we were doing our sweep, and the forward elements came across a big Chinese claymore mine, and so they disconnected it, followed the wire back, and the sentries on it were asleep. But instead of just sticking a bayonet in them, they shot them, and of course that woke people up, and then next thing we're in a firefight. However, we was able to advance forward, and they dived into their holes and returned fire occasionally here and there, and we took the high ground without a great deal of difficulty and only a few casualties, and we just held the high ground. And then the side, they'd call in a chopper to take out our wounded, which was about 7. So the chopper came in, and it was and at the same time the NVA did a counter-attack, or an element of them. I'd say there's only about a squad, maybe a few more. They did a counter-attack from the rear, from which way we came, and we hadn't been covering our tail. So they got in very close, right up to the chopper pretty well, and but we were successful in knocking them back. Now, from that we've got quite a lot of explosives, TNT style explosives, and they stacked them because some of the troops were quite adept at going into tunnels and this type of thing, and something I wouldn't do. I hated tunnels, and so they just stacked them up, and then all of a sudden they decided they're going to leave and go back to the battalion. Now, you don't understand these things at times. Why? And they left this damn great pile of bloody explosives. And being TNT, most of it will just burn. So I broke a little bit up and started to fire away from it. And as the rear elements were going out, and we burned it, and it was just one huge fire. It was still burning when we got back onto our thing. But that was just a small operation. We went back the following day, and they were a little bit more hostile, and our battalion commander was wounded, and we lost him because of that. And the XO became the CO. His name was Tin. We had Daiwi Kin was wounded, and Daiwi Tin, who was a Catholic, he took over, and he was a brilliant commander as well. I had much real respect for both of them, and he took over, had command for quite some time. But that was sort of typical from a base like as such. We didn't go out and sort of hoorah too much, because we couldn't afford to lose too many people. But every time we went out, we got into some sort of a scrap.
How efficient were the enemy at doing their job? How did you rate the enemy?
Out of 10, I'd give him 9. He was good. The NVA, I was very impressed with them. They were very professional at that time anyhow, and highly trained, highly motivated. Their equipment was good, pretty well. Their footwear left a lot to be desired. Yeah, there's things like that, but yes, I hold them in high respect.
Were there moments out there with the amount of contact that you were having that you have thought, you know, I might not see tomorrow, or I might not see Australia again?
Yes, but I sort of, when you get those thoughts, you put them behind you if you can. Particularly when you're out in the open and you get caught with artillery fire, which happened often, because their artillery was very good. The good thing about it though is they didn't fire for long periods of time, because American air was up there very quick. Now, their artillery from the DMZ was mostly hidden in the sides of a mountain. There was a mountain there, a feature there we used to call Signal Mountain, just American name for it, and their guns were in the side, like that film The Guns of Navarone, a little bit. So they'd fire several rounds, and then they'd pull the guns back in the camouflage, and the American air never got them too much, because they still fired the next day. And they were very good artillerymen too. They had all the targets, already designed, so that's the most frightening thing I found up there, was their artillery. And then it's quite often you think, well, maybe I won't get home. And but other than that, but I had a determination too to come home, which I think, and so therefore you've got to put, when this fear thing starts kicking in, you've got to kick it out straight away. And
I was thinking really of moments perhaps when you're actually seeing the whites of the other fella's eyes.
Yes. See, after a while with the other battalion, we went mobile then. So with the battalions, there's 4 battalions on outposts, and 1 battalion was mobile. So and they rotated. Now it's the 5th battalion, its time was after about 3 months we become mobile, 4 months perhaps, and we then put on a fire support base, Charlie 1. It's an American American fire support base that had marine guns on it, 175s, 155s, 8 inches, had ARVN guns on it and American Army guns on it. So it was a huge base, and we were put in there an ARVN battalion, and our patrolling was then in depth mostly, but up to the Alpha line, and every time we went out then, we generally patrolled as a battalion, and we got into trouble every day. And close quarter fighting, there's everything involved, and the troops, as I say, they were good, and they couldn't afford not to be with the type of battalion commanders they had, because they'd get a flogging if they veered away from their duty, I suppose. But no, they were great. I had a lot of time for them, and I left the 5th Battalion in the November, and because we generally had a rotation in country, and I was a bit sorry to go, because I just really got used to them, and we got on very, very well, and but it's the thing. It had to be the thing to do, because one had to get as much experience as possible. So I left there and got rotated and went to Pleiku to Mike Force, 5th Special Forces Group, and that again was a totally different sort of story and different type of warfare.
Before I ask you about that, what was your impression of the American advisors that you worked with?
Oh, great! Yeah, no, pretty good. Yes, the Captain Jim Williams, he was a professional from Alabama, and he knew his stuff pretty well, and he was a good mentor for me to start with. He'd been in the Tet Offensive in Hawaii, so he sort of got me stepping off on the correct foot at the time. There's a Negro sergeant called Troy Floyd Wilkes, an E7. His surname the same as me, but rather dark, and a great bloke. And he and I used to get on very well. And so when we'd go out, when we was on the outpost there, and we'd go out as a team, he and I would generally team up, because we always went out at least 2 advisors with a company. for example, and never one advisor on his own, and so we could support each other. Or if one got knocked off, the other could carry the job, go on with the job. And but we got on exceptionally well. Just an interesting thing, we had this a replacement. Lieutenant Dan Briggs came to us and was doing an operation between Alpha 3 and the rock pile, which is to the west again, up on the demilitarized zone. And it was a place they call Artillery Alley, and it was obvious, its name become obvious to us. And Dan Briggs, in the afternoon when we harboured for the night, we have good little Arvin soldiers that come along and dig our weapon pits for us. And it was monsoon season, and it rained, and he'd only been in country a short time, and he wasn't aware what the rain can do. And so he had a hammock, and so he insisted on having his hole dug between two stumps, and that's all that was around the place as far as trees were concerned, because everything was blown off the ground. And so these two stumps, and he had his hammock, his hole dug in there, and his hammock slung between the two stumps. And anyhow, so he said, well, if we get incoming tonight or any time, I can just roll off and into the hole. And of course he didn't have any drainage put around, he didn't ask for that. Troy, Sergeant Wilkes and myself, we all sort of shared the same sort of weapon pit, so we slept on the ground beside ours, and we had drainage around it, and but we were pretty right. As soon as you get any incoming or anything, you just roll into it. And anyhow, through the night we got incoming, and it rained, it had really pissed down, and so Dan Briggs, we hear this yell and a splash, and because he's only a short distance from us, and he thought that he'd copped it, he thought he's going on the way up there. So anyhow, we don't know what happened, whether artillery had loosened the soil around one of the stumps, or a shard of shrapnel had cut the end of his hammock. But anyhow, he was in the water and he drank. And in the drink he was about 2 foot of water. So next day he found God. A visiting padre came up to the outpost, and he and a new sergeant, American sergeant we'd got as a replacement too. They were both pretty shocked, and still in a state of shock. So they found God and they went and they can become very religious.
I can understand that it's turning into a religious experience. I think you're not going to be right. Okay, Mike Force.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that second posting and how it was when you first got there, and what you understood the situation when you first got there, and what your duties were to be?
Sure. Well, when I got there,
Can you say where you got to, when you got to?
Pleiku.
Yeah.
Yes. When I arrived at Pleiku, met by, I think it was Captain Peter Rothwell at the airport, and Pleiku Air Base, and taken to the base, which is just around the Mike Force was just around the airstrip and on the other side slightly. We had shared a barbed wire fence with the airstrip. The Mike Force headquarters, or the Mike Force base, the camp, maintained 3 battalions, 1st, 2nd and 3rd Battalion, 2nd Mobile Strike Force. And across the road was a C team, what they call C team, which was like a support company, a little bit related to an air system, but they looked after all our provisionary sides, our support, getting stuff out to us in the field, and they did a very important job. And also training of the new Montagnards, because our soldiers we had there were Montagnards, tribal people, they were mercenaries, so I was appointed to the number 16 company, 2nd Mobile Strike Force, and then they redesignated it to 223 company. So in the battalion we had 3 companies. There's 221, for example, the 2nd Battalion where I was, there's 221, 222 and 223 company. Captain Peter Rothwell was the company commander, and I took over from a bloke called Warrant Officer John Grafton, because there's a lot of Australians there, so I felt very comfortable straight away. And of course I'm very comfortable with Americans, because all the commanders were Americans and Australians. And so I felt very comfortable, and I was very fortunate to have this Warrant Officer Grafton. He was there for about a week, 10 days, whilst I was there. Now, quite often this didn't happen. They would have been left before their replacement arrived. But John, he remained behind. I think he was on the way home, or I'm not quite sure. He might have been on rotation himself. And so
he was able to brief you.
He was able to brief me and introduce me to the platoon. The platoon was a recon platoon in the battalion, in the company. There's 4 platoons in the company, and one platoon had been designated as a recon platoon. Although we didn't do a lot of recon work, it was nearly all our work was nearly always company work. And so John did a great job, and he took me down to the village. The Montagnards had a local dependence village, and they were always very interesting people, and those curious people, and very well mannered, and I got on marvellously with them. I think everyone did. All the round eyes, as we were called round eyes, Americans and Australians, and I felt comfortable with them for a start, you know, with the Montagnards. So I enjoyed working with them all the time.
When you heard... Yep, certainly we'll stop there. Our next question will be, we're going to change tape now, next tape. Wasn't it a bit like going out of the frying pan into the fire, in terms of the one...
Time code on user bits 98, it's for AATV, shoot at Canungra on the 3rd of February. Jeremy Lindemann, producer director, audio John Easter Doyley Cameron, and audio tracks are split on 1 and 2. Tone and bars and reference will follow.
Great. Yep. Peter, maybe it was a bit like going from the frying pan into the fire in terms of the difference between the first posting and the second posting, in that Special Forces were known to have a lot of enemy contact, partly because of their geographical placing. So did that occur to you? Did you feel that when you knew where you were going?
Well, I'd been adequately briefed, as I mentioned, with John Grafton, and he told me sort of how they react to things, and they're very superstitious people, the Montagnards, and I think that played a little bit in some ways towards the way they reacted. For example, if someone woke up with a nightmare, or we might, or a nervous thing, a PTSD type thing, I suppose, to them, because they've been scrapping around for a fair while. But if a person had a nightmare or a bad dream, in the morning he'd relate it to his mates, and they would sometimes take this as in the view that something bad was going to happen to him through the next day.
An omen.
Yeah, an omen. Yeah, and they could sometimes they would not perform how you want them to perform. You're travelling from point A to point B. They'd travel slow, for example, and very carefully and very slow, and they didn't want to get anywhere too fast. They didn't want to make contact with the enemy, and that type of thing. That sort of thing happened. And sometimes I didn't like operating in particular areas, because most of our operations were in the highlands, and say from Bambi Tut in the south right up to the north of Kontum. So if it's an area where they'd been in conflict, where NVA had been very bad before, they'd sometimes they were reluctant to even turn up. If they knew where the operation was going to take place, they wouldn't turn up. And so you'd go out on an operation, and your company might be short. I suppose it could be, each platoon could be short 10 or 15 people occasionally, and so it was. The idea of it was not to tell them where we were going. We'd say, right, we've got an operation going. Everyone be here at such and such a time, and then we do the pre-operation checks and issue weapons and ammunition and all this type of thing, and still don't tell them where we was going until the last minute, and until we was ready to get on the choppers or on the trucks to go to the airport, to the air base. But other than that, if they were quite happy, they were operated very, very well. But I found in the field, I generally had good support from them. There's only once that they were very reluctant to follow, but that was only once with me. But I know with other advisors or oblique commanders, that was slightly different. And so other people can relate to different types of experiences. But all in all, I liked them. They were very friendly people. They were like a bunch of kids often. They come up and put their arm around you, things like this, or they put their arm around each other. Their hygiene habits were terrible. They spit and urinate anywhere, excrete anywhere. So we used to teach them when like they were well taught in their training that they had to cover up their excrement and this type of thing, and that they'd get, if they could get away with it, they wouldn't sometimes because it's just old habits. But by the same token, if they walk past the water hole and there's a bit of time, they'd wash themselves all the time. They'd always clean themselves, but their other habits were bloody dismal. And
how did you like their rice wine?
Rice wine? Oh my God, they raped me off in rice wine. A terrible thing. Yeah. I went out of the village one day with a medic because the American Special Forces medics used to go down and help them out all the time. It was just one of the extended services, and help with childbirth and all sorts of things, and ringworm, anything they had going wrong with them. And so I was invited to go down, and next thing I was grabbed for a rice wine, but I didn't know what was going on. I was just grabbed, and I was pushed in under this damn hut, which all the huts were sort of joined up, and the next thing I brought out this damn great big earthenware jug, and it had 2 marks on the top, and the jug had hold probably about 2.5 gallons of liquid, and there's 2 marks on top, and one above the other, and what the marks were, it was a beer can. They use that as a measure. A beer can, you take it from the top mark, you take a beer can out and it comes to drop to the bottom mark. So that was only the reason for the 2 marks, and you had to drink a beer can's worth of drink. And then they threw it was just water they drawn out of the well or out of the paddy, I don't know. And then they threw this big ball of rice in there, and then which was it was putrid, to say the least, and mouldy and everything else, green, and then they threw some ferns in on the top of it to stop the sediment from the rice floating, and it did have a bit of a fizz, but it wasn't effervescent when you drank it. And they had a tube, and so being the guest of honour, now it was very strong at this stage, see, so being the guest of honour, I had to drink it from mark to mark. It was very hard to drink, and then they passed it around. Of course, it's not on this wiping it before you put it in your mouth, and of course you don't know whether the person next to you had TB or what, VD or anything, and so. But after a while, as you can imagine, and when you drink out of that mark, they'd top it up, and they'd keep topping you up, and after a while, the alcohol content had lessened a little bit. But by that time, you're out of your tree anyhow, and you don't care about who had to drink it out of the tube before you. But at that time I was a recon platoon commander, and my platoon sergeant, a bloke on Nyang, he invited me over to his house for lunch, for dinner, midday meal, and so his wife was there. He introduced me to his wife, and it was just a lovely little, one of his little kids, I think he had 1 or 2, I'm not sure, and there's this great big pile of boiled rice, and in the middle of it was half a bullock's heart. And I can't stand offal at the best of times, and this rice wine didn't help me at all a little bit, so I just couldn't shut my mind off. But I was eating the rice and sort of going around the heart, so eventually I had to start eating it, and then I started dry heaving. So I said to Young, I said, too much rice wine, mate, too much rice wine. I said, I'm very sorry. So I just did the best I could, and the next thing I had to go outside and decorated the ground somewhat, and come back in. You had to have another go at it, so I did so. And anyhow, I just kept on blaming the wine. He took it, he accepted that, but he didn't know it was a cross between the rice wine and me and that damn bullock's heart. I got a weak gut.
So, with the reconnaissance,
yeah.
Your position as the head of the reconnaissance platoon, what you're looking for the enemy, are you? What is the role? What is the job? How do you do your job?
Well, we also had a reconnaissance company there. That's something I omitted. We had 3 battalions and a reconnaissance company which was separated from the battalions, and there was, I think, at least 3 warrant officers in that company. And but in the platoon, in the company situation, it was just when we'd perhaps pull up for a stop, we'd harbour, take up all round defence, and the reconnaissance platoon would go out, probe further to see what could be in front of us, or to our flanks or whatever. And our idea was to get information, and without it wasn't a fighting patrol as such. We weren't there to exchange shots unless we were shot at. But our idea was to go out and see what enemy activity was out in front of us. And if we could see it, observe it, and see how many is there, report back to the company or bring them up and see what we're going to, the company commander, see what he's going to do about it, whether he's going to attack them or find out more information by reconnoitring around and then make an inform a plan to see whether he's going to attack or what. But they also, you know, they had sentries out and listening posts and all this type of thing. Very good at that. Similar to the Australian system.
Did you were awarded decorations, were you not, for your whilst you were in Vietnam or subsequently?
Yes, I was awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal, and also the United States awarded me the Silver Star and the Bronze Star for Valour, and the Republic of Vietnam government awarded me the Cross of Gallantry with the Bronze Star.
Was that for one action?
No. The Distinguished Conduct Medal was awarded for an assault on a, it was when I was with Mike Force, for an assault on a what had been a former United States fire support base, which was right next to the tri-border of Laos, Cambodia and South Vietnam. And the battalion had gone on that operation to do, it was just a search and destroy. It was only a fortnight before Ben hit A camp, which was located near that same vicinity, had been under siege from the North Vietnamese army, and so the siege had been broken 2 weeks before, and they wanted to know, they need to know where the North Vietnamese forces, whether they'd gone back into Cambodia and Laos, or whether they still running around the ridges, and if so, what sort of preparation, what they had with them in the way of support weapons, particularly because the Ben Head A camp had been consistently getting 75mm artillery rounds lobbing in on them. So to get that, they had to, the gun had to be within 6,500 metres away, and their spotters could not always pick the position where the gun was firing from. So it was obvious that the gun had to be on some sort of either they had more than one gun, several guns, and they only fired them intermittently every now and then, and taking in turns, sort of thing, and or they had a gun, a pack gun, which the 75mm, there's several varieties, and a Japanese model had probably had a couple of 100 metres more range than some of the Chinese and the Russian ones, and the North Vietnamese had the lot in their arsenal, so they could have had a ring road and a pack gun, and that was my opinion, and which sort of I still believe that now from evidence from later operations and from other units. So at that time, this fire support base 29er, which the Americans had used and left intact with bunkers and everything else, it was overlooking Ben Het. Now they'd observed, from Ben Het, they'd observed a light every night up on the fire support base. And so they knew that the NVA were there, and I thought the NVA were damn careless not to have blackout curtains, and or they just figured the light wouldn't show that far. I don't know, it was a crazy thing because they're very professional. So our battalion went in to do this operation of just search, destroy, find out anything we could, and we were diverted to clear that fire support base, attack the fire support base. So we did after flying in onto the airstrip, we moved south about 1,000 metres to a big ridge line we could all occupy pretty well. Digging was good, best I've ever seen digging. You never find good digging when you're digging a weapon pit, but it was quite good, and we were briefed on all the local situations of contacts and that in the previous few weeks, and from the fire support base, from Ben Het, the Special Forces camp, and so we moved close. The following day, under cover of darkness in the morning, we had a bit of open ground across, or semi-open. We moved across and moved just south of this fire support base, and just off it actually. But prior to doing that, we had an air reconnaissance with the chopper, and we were able to fly down. And I plotted all the bunkers on the main feature. The feature was like a bit like the talon of an emu, I suppose. There's two fingers, two ridge lines stuck out like that, and one down the rear here, and this one here, this ridge line here to the north, it was higher than the one on the other side, and so that was obviously going to be our main concern. So I plotted all the bunkers in there, and the forward defence line, or the crawl communication trench, as we call it. And then we went back, and we back to Ben Het, and got our units moved forward, and so then the three company commanders, the other two, by this time I was company commander of 223 Company, and Captain Peter Duff Wilkes, having left sometime before, I think it was my third operation as a, I'm not quite certain, that's their third operation as a company commander, and so the three company commanders, there's Lieutenant Robertson from 222 Company, and Lieutenant Sievers from 222 Company, and so we got our heads together, and I drew the short straw, and so went for the attack. I drew the short straw. I knew I was going to for some reason, and so I was going to attack on gun target line. Gun target line meaning that it was, and in fact I wanted to attack from that position. Gun target line being that I was between the fire support from Ben Het, if they was going to give us fire support, and the target. So it's not an ideal position normally, because if there's any rounds fall short, you can lose a lot of people. But I did but I insisted on doing a complete reconnaissance, and a lot of times in Mike Force we didn't allow ourselves time for a good reconnaissance. So I did the day reconnaissance, and the feature itself was totally bare from the very top right down to about 150 yards from the top down to the timber line. And it wasn't a skerrick of timber or bamboo or anything on it, and we were harboured just down from that, and in a very nice silent camp. So I'd reconnoitred the next day around the other side and sorted out where I was going to place fire support, my own internal fire support, 2 machine guns, then that night I did a reconnoitre to go across the area where I was going to attack from. Now I could see that at the top of the feature there's a little bit of dead ground from the top down, just only a little bit, only dead ground if the soldiers were in a crouch, and so it made it very easy for me, so that when I did the night reconnaissance, I could see that I could move straight in to the attack line. I didn't have to have a forming up place. The forming up place and the assault line were exactly the same. So, and it was just only a few metres from the brow of the ridge, but we had to be done at a crouch. Now, normally attacks are done at last light or first light. Now, from many times in the past, as I mentioned earlier, the enemy, if there's no threat, they like to have a little bit of a sleep in the middle of the day. And so I took that into consideration. Now, on the night of the reconnaissance, I got up close enough to be able to see them from the sort of lip of the hill, and they're sitting on the bunkers, smoking and talking and yapping and carrying on. It's only 35, 40 metres away, and I didn't stay too long, because I thought, well, if someone comes out for a piss, something, I might get sprung, and I'll just stuff up the whole damn thing. So I went out with one of the other platoon commanders, a chap called an E5 called Bill Wiley. So anyhow, I finished the reconnoitre, came back, formed the plan, got the other two company commanders, and made a model, a map model, and explained it to the indigenous, our counterparts. So we had we don't give orders directly to the Montagnards. We give it to another chap who's a sort of company commander as well. He was a subordinate company commander. And anyhow, this worked very well, because they knew exactly what they were doing, where their positions were in the attack, and the whole damn thing. And so I decided I'd attack with 1.5 platoons up, 1.5 platoons in the rear, and so that was a three platoon. That was a 3 platoon attack, and the 4th platoon was to provide covering fire to, if we needed. If Charlie had spotted us, they was to fire aim shots between the attackers, us, just to keep their heads down, because I knew there's a good chance that our blokes would turn and gallop off, come back, and I'd sent the other support group around the other side, 2 machine guns, and they were actually their main purpose was to stop if the enemy sent in reinforcements from the north, then they could sort of keep them slow them down a bit. And the 2 machine guns from the other 2 sections, where the section was to fire between us, they were to give us rear protection. I didn't want machine guns firing support for us from down there. It was too dangerous, and they have a tendency to sort of not handle the M60 too well. So with the left flanking platoon, they had 2 sections front, 2 sections rear, with a commander in between to make up the assault group and the support, the depth group. And then 1 platoon was leading, and 2 platoon was in depth. So on HAR, I had artillery organised for as cut-offs, purely for cut-offs and to stop enemy from coming in on the northern side of the feature for HAR plus 3 minutes. So 3 minutes after the attack begun, we would start getting artillery fire on the right flank. We commenced the attack. We'd only just gone forward, and now at the same time, the other 2 companies were attacking the smaller feature underneath, which they chose, and my left flanking, a couple of montagnards on my left flank must have been drifted a little bit down to the left too far, and the platoon sergeant Kim Bustamante, E7, he yelled out a profanity. He must have just forgot where he was, and I heard it. Next thing, a burst of fire comes through, and it wounded 2 fellas, and of course everyone froze. Every soldier bloody well froze, and so I rushed in, and these 2 blokes were in shock. So I speared them down. There's a big bomb crater down the side there, and I'd organised that as our aid post, our casualty post, and so I speared them down there. They'd all been briefed on the damn thing, and rushed back, and bugger me dead, we'd run into barbed wire. Now the barbed wire is just 2 rolls of wire side by side, and it wasn't on the plan at all. It was the same colour as the dirt, which was red, and we didn't see it by the air reconnaissance, and we didn't see it until we got there. And the montagnards had never been taught how to breach wire. So I thought this is going to be one hell of a bloody thing. So I run along the wire like a bloody mad thing, and trying to find a gap. And then the platoon sergeant from the right-hand platoon, 1 platoon, he said, "Middle Wallaby over here." So there was a gap, and so look, I struck by luck, and I think the good Lord was with me all the time, and I certainly prayed enough the night before, so he was definitely there, and so I led the platoon single file through that bloody gap, and you know, you just don't do those sort of things, and got them in the forward defence line, or the communication trench, sent them around both ways, and then the next platoon followed, and then we had 3 platoons I'd say on the ground within bloody 3 or 4 minutes. And Charlie was completely taken by surprise. Although when the machine gun had opened up, here's the enemy machine gun, they fired within, I suppose, took about 15 seconds, and then they all opened up, but they were firing mostly at the 2 platoons, the 2 companies down there that was attacking the other feature. They thought that's what was going on. Thank goodness it happened that way. But we got it from 3 bunkers. We got a hell of a lot of fire on our way. We got in, we cleared those pretty quickly, and so I had the company in there pretty well. Then I called the support groups in, and so the entire company was on the feature. We'd captured the observation bunker and killed the observer, and then it was bunker to bunker fighting all the time, and it was slow, tedious, and a lot of hand-to-hand fighting, and close quarter fighting, and it was extremely interesting. The scrap art lasted 9 hours. We was resupplied with ammunition on the way through, and I might have changed my vehicle. Sorry.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh no, we might cut for a moment.
Oh, I see.
We've got.
5, 4.
Okay, Peter.
Yeah, so this was all post-quarter fighting all the way through. Now, during this time, I'd lost 5 soldiers wounded. That's all, and that's incredible, just absolutely an incredible thing. And then Lieutenant Sievers from 222 Company, he decided he wanted a bit of the action. Now he was down on this other ridge, and he decided that he was going to come up and see what he could do. Now there's a lot of stuff going on the radio, and the radio was actually jammed from communication between my my signals operator, and the other companies, and I had to tell them to change to the alternate frequency if they just want to talk rubbish whilst I was running the scrap. But anyhow, Lieutenant Sievers decided he'd come up, and he came up and he crossed the communication trench on the southern side. He was about to cross it when he got shot in the head, and he from the same gunner which we had thought we'd cleared. I was assured that he'd been cleared, that area had been cleared, and by the same gunner that initiated the contact. He'd been lying doggo up there between the first contact till we overrun that area. He'd found a niche in the wall, and which he'd pre-prepared, and Sievers was dead. And so another Sergeant Daniels, Master Sergeant Daniels, took over his American, took over his company, and I got relieved just before dark. But just as he got up there, he was relieved in place, and Daniels decided he was running down a communication trench, and I think he had Mont yards who were starting to follow him, and they must have slowed down or stopped. The fact pilot warned us on the radio, said, "Tell that man to stop going down there. There's NVA in a little bunker on the side there." And we couldn't get word to him, so Sergeant Daniels was then killed. We got them out. It's just regretful. There's two deaths that didn't need to happen really, because of the way it happened, because of the way things were. So needless to say, that enemy machine gun was put out of commission pretty quick. So that, and then after when I was completely relieved in place, but this time we pulled out our dead. There's 25 enemy. We killed 25 enemy. I believe that there's only a platoon of enemy up there. However, the official report said there's an entrenched company. There could have been, but what was left, they broke contact through the night and got away. And but they fought well, but they were just overwhelmed, I think, and we just had total surprise. It was a copybook attack, but it was also I got away with a lot that you wouldn't normally get away with. But using that the middle of the day, the hot part of the day, it works, and or did at the time. I hope they don't see this film, because they might change their tactics.
Okay, getting towards the end of the tour.
Yeah.
How were you feeling? Were you looking forward to returning to Australia? What was going through your mind towards the end of your tour?
Well, whilst I was over there, I had twin girls born, and that was a single man's war, and I tell you the truth, I loved the war. I liked it. I enjoyed it, and I didn't really. I wanted to stay over 6 months, but it wasn't fair to my family, and so I came home. And but I still living there for a while. You know, it's a very strange feeling, and you wonder about always wondering about the Mont yards, their welfare and things like this. I did for a long time, and but you know, that's the way it is. I suppose I guess a lot of other people feel that way.
Did it because of public opinion also? Some of the team people have expressed unhappiness at in settling down, in trying to return to normal life in just generally in the fact that the kind of public opinion was very much against the war. There was no real understanding of why you guys were doing what you were doing, all that sort of thing. Did that affect you in any way when you came back?
Yes, it did. Yeah, I think it affected us all. It was so. Well, there's a lot of people that said we got our soldiers are over there, but the communists are over here, and that's pretty well true. I was very bitter with members of the Australian Labor Party, and particularly Dr. Jim Cairns, and what he and his crew were doing. And I still believe that Dr. Jim Cairns is a communist in the Labor Party. They had quite a few kicking around at those times, and I believe he and others should have been charged for treason. When he took that trip to Vietnam, and the papers had a picture of him behind the podium on their parliament, and with the North Vietnamese flag in front of it, and they say that no one could be charged for treason because it wasn't a declared war. But I say this: did Adolf Hitler declare war against the Jews and the Gypsies and all those minority groups he didn't like? He didn't declare war on them, but he still murdered them, and they're still chasing war criminals. And I believe that we got war criminals that should be chased. And not to do anything severe with them, just take away their citizenship and kick them out of the country. And,
Your hand came right across on that line of...
Can you just repeat that? I was just stressing. Can you, just a bit about Jim Cairns, could you just repeat that? My arm interrupted your...
Okay, yeah. Yes, I believe that Dr. Jim Cairns should have been charged for treason, or treasonable act anyhow, and a hell of a lot of people, these people who actively supported the enemy, either morally or financially, or with comforts, sending blood to them, first aid, all this type of thing, medical aid, and because it's just so un-Australian. And I believe those people. I think there hangs a bit of there's treasonable acts, I believe, and I don't think it's never too late to charge them. And but I don't think we've got any government with enough guts in this nation, or political parties that would ever attempt to do it. They say it wasn't a declared war. That's so true, but there'll never be a declared war again. I don't believe, and the wars will just happen, and they'll be fast and furious. But Adolf Hitler never declared war on the Jews. He never declared war on the Gypsies and those other minority groups that he was intent on annihilating, and they're still hunting those German war criminals. So why shouldn't we do the same for our war criminals, who I believe are war criminals? I don't think enough.
Yeah.
Yes, Kat. Yeah. Can we just get some... Okay. To see, the thing is that out of everything that you've told me over 50 minutes or whatever, 45, 50 minutes, I'll probably end up using maybe 6 minutes of what you said.
Yeah, I understand that.
So
Yeah.
it's heavily edited. So,
Thankfully.
and it's very easy for me to put one section of you with another, with nobody at home realising that I put that bit there. So on the very end section, because of my hand, all I've got to do is tack on a piece to cover where my hand is, or cut to your hand or something, and it's there anyway.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
it won't seem disjointed. It won't be disjointed.
No, that's good, because I thought I hadn't given any before it came up. I never thought, well, what sort of steel I'll talk about. So things like the attack on Firebase 29, it could be more fluid as it happened piecemeal.
But because of the time constraint, I grabbed initially for myself and for the army what appears to be the best form, shortened version of that. And if the army are happy with it, and I'm happy with it, then for sure you'll be happy with it too.
They probably won't put in the political bit.
I might leave that out.
No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't dare do that. But anyhow.
But you see, the thing is that these tapes are also going to be seen by military historians. They're going to be accessed. These master tapes are going to be able to be accessed by military historians into the future. 50 years, 100, 150 years' time. There's no point in not saying what you think. Because it's important. If it's important because you think it, say it. I would say, say it. Because people have said some pretty amazing things. the ex-RSM Wally
Thompson?
Wally Thompson.
Yeah.
He said some amazing stuff. He got stuck into the army today.
The 30-second atmosphere track to cover that whole interview. From now. Thank you. And then.
Got all those books?